Hey everyone, I'm so excited for another interview today, and I am so excited to welcome Ashley Weiss on as our guest. So, a natural storyteller with a flair for the dramatic, Ashley Weiss lives in Alberta, Canada. Her debut novel, Cupid's Compass, began as a 2020 quarantine project and grew to be an irreplaceable passion. When she isn't writing, Ashley can be found cuddling her dog or watching movies with her love. So, welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie.
I can't wait to do this interview with you because I read Cupid's Compass not long ago and just thought it just blew me away, and so I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
I am so excited you read it. I am delighted you decided to do this like podcast series. I think it's amazing and I'm honored to be in like the first one. Is this your fifth interview?
Yeah, it's like my fifth one now. Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And I first gotta say, I really love following you on Instagram and just seeing all the author things you're doing. And you are on a roll. Like, you go to so many events to sell your books and just get yourself out there. And I just got it, like, I just first of all have to say that's amazing. And then
Thank
second, like, how do you do it? Maybe like I don't know if you want to share tips at all, but like just, getting yourself out there. I mean, isn't that kind of nerve-wracking, or are you kind of used to it now, or
I feel like I'm starting to get the ropes of it now. I think that I am lucky to be one of the few writers who falls more on the extroverted side of the spectrum. So doing public events and public speaking isn't as challenging for me, whereas I do find the majority of writers are naturally more introverted. There's a reason they love, being in their kind of like office space. So what kind of started as this dream of having just one book signing event at an Indigo chapters, all of a sudden blew up, and I started looking for more and more opportunities. And it started with just bookstores, and then I started looking into markets. And then December was really cool because I did like a whole bunch of different like holiday shopping events, and it was just like the payoff was so huge. Not only being able to just reach a demographic that I just can't reach on socials no matter how much I try, but like having people who have already read my book go out of their way to come to these events, to come and buy character art or just to like meet me in person is it's been amazing and I'm really grateful for it. So, well, the first 6 months of my book launch, I did a lot. My intention for the rest of this year now is like, I want to do maybe one a month and just kind of like pace myself because they can be really tiring, but it's so rewarding. And with my goal of getting my book into as many people's hands as possible, it's just like really supports that.
yeah, I like that. That totally makes sense. And I feel like local people are more willing to support local authors. So it's like, oh, hey, you live in my area and you wrote a book. I want to read it. So yeah, yeah.
I
And when you meet the author face to face, you feel like that connection, and there's a lot more of a desire to pick up their books. So that's very
and it
true.
helps really like reach your audience demographic. So like Cupid's Compass ideally is written for a female audience age, let's say 15 and up. But like to be able to like pick and choose people coming into a bookstore who are there to discover a new author, and to be able to like connect with those readers who maybe don't have social media, or just our paths would have never crossed. It's a gift
Yeah,
and an excellent opportunity.
that's so true. That's very true. And I'll have to consider like doing some research in my area to do that, because yeah, it's true. And you can reach that demographic, that audience.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about your author journey. So start out with, like, I guess, when you started writing and what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I've always been, a storyteller, as every writer is, like from youth. It's just what I've always had a passion for. But it wasn't actually until 2020 that I started working on Cupid's Compass. And in my mortal life, as I like to call it, I'm a massage therapist. And I was off work inevitably because of COVID. So I literally was just in my one bedroom apartment all day, every day for I think it was 3 or 4 months straight. And on day 6, I woke up like with the fully developed idea. Like, I just sat up in bed in the dark and was like, I want to write a book about people connected to their soulmates through compass tattoos. And my boyfriend happened to be up making coffee. It was like 6 in the morning, something outrageous. And I go out into the kitchen and it was so bright. So I had my eyes closed and I walked right up to him and I was like, I'm gonna write a book. And he was like, okay, babe, like I think that you're like kind of tired. Why don't you go back to bed? And I was like, no, I'm gonna write a book. Can I tell you the concept? And he was like, okay. So like I hop up on the counter and like I just like pitch this idea to him and he's just, being polite, like, okay, like that's really awesome, babe. And then by the time he got home from work that day, our entire apartment was covered in like these like pad pages of like outlines and characters. And I was like, I am writing a book. And he's like, you are writing a book. So I just had all of the time and I really needed like that creative, productive kind of like stability in that time of my life. And yeah, it just all came to fruition. And I'd always planned on writing a book, but before that moment, I just didn't really have like that opportunity to be like, it's now, the time is now.
Yeah, I love that. And I chuckle because it's like, yeah, babe, that's cool. And then realize, oh wait, you're being serious. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious, what does he think now that you've published this book and you're doing all these author events and such?
He is such a huge supporter in my life. I mean,
Aw.
he has saved my butt so many times. The amount of times I've gone to a market and either forgot my signing pens, my like square reader so I could take payments, my banner. I famously have to call him at least once for every event, be like, I forgot this. And he just like, I'll be right there. And
Aw.
whenever I in to not forget something, he'll just bring me a coffee, come be a little like morale booster whenever things are slower. So he said when we had our book launch, I had like a more intimate party with my immediate friends and family, and each of them kind of gave me like this like toast. And I had asked him like, what was it like for you when I decided to write a book? And he's like, well, you became very busy. He's like, but I saw the moment you decided you were going to do it, and I knew you were going to be successful. And
Aw.
it's just amazing to have someone in my corner like that.
Right. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you that you have him to be a supporter. That's so great. And what made you want to go the indie route?
That was chaotic. I thoroughly researched and tried all three different routes. So I looked into self-publishing, I looked into hybrid publishing, and I looked into traditional publishing. After initially doing all my research on all three, I started the hybrid route, which is when you like hire a company that essentially facilitates a lot of the background parts for you. So uploading your book to different medias and promoting your book on their website. But right away, I kind of started to realize like a lot of the things they were offering were really expensive. And I was like, could I do this myself? At that time, it did feel really daunting. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I should just try to traditionally publish. So I did spend a year querying my book, looking for agents. And unfortunately, just with like the young adult market right now, it's super oversaturated. And though I got a lot of responses being like, this is really cool, this is really awesome, it's just like not quite a right fit right now. I came to the end of the year and I was like, you know what? I was like, I am more than capable. And so I really like believe that every book published, no matter which route it takes, earns its own merit and like the amount of quality in it depends so much on how much the author puts in it. But ultimately I wound up going self-published that way. There were a couple of massive benefits to going indie, and that was primarily having exclusive creative control over my cover design and the content inside my book. I was really worried because my story is a multi POV narrative with 11 different characters, with one of them being a non binary character. I really thought that by getting signed on with a bigger publishing house that they would either force me to reduce the amount of characters that I was following or get me to cut the non-binary character, because we're not seeing quite as much of that in the trad industry yet. It's coming in tastes, but there was this relief when I decided to change gears and go indie, because I was like, I know now that this story is going to really be what I wanted it to be.
Right. And I love that. I love that about indie because, yeah, you have that creative control and it allows you to be able to break some of those rules. like having 11 POVs, which I have questions about that, but we'll go to that later. But yeah, you have that creative control, and yeah, you can just break rules. And sometimes breaking the rules, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with going indie, it allows you to explore that. And I thought it worked really well in your book, and I didn't feel like I was getting lost on characters or like, oh, who's this character again? Like I was able to follow along really well. So I thought you did a good job with that. Um, and then yeah, with like traditional, I mean, I can't imagine like going a year of querying your book. What was that like, getting like rejections and then ultimately coming to that idea, or that not idea, but that decision to, I'm gonna go indie.
It was hard. It was mentally taxing and it was really frustrating because in that time period, my intention was like, oh, I'm going to query. And while I'm querying, I'm going to continue writing book two. But what I would have never guessed was just how time consuming writing and researching and personalizing each individual email to every agent was going to cost. And like there were tons that just never responded. But then when those rejections came in, like it was really hard just like kind of like taking those and like having to take that moment and be like, this is not a reflection of me or my work. Like I think I read a stat somewhere that it was like for one agent they would expect to get 1,000 queries in a year, and they would, for 1,000 queries they would pick one to pitch.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I knew the odds were low. I knew that it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. You're looking for the perfect person that your book is a fit for and that they are a fit for you. But you know, after receiving a multitude of people being like, not truly saying these words, but what it felt like was them saying your book's just not good enough, not quite good enough. That was really hard. So when it came to the time, when it came to December and that like deadline that I had set for myself to make a decision by was, I had so much relief. Like it was like I had just taken a mountain of emotional stress off my shoulders. And I never looked back. I was like, this is absolutely the right path. Lots of my really, really close, like my best friend and my mom were like, we all knew you were going to self publish. Like we, knew I was going to come for this. But I had to do that year. Like I had to take that time for myself and really decide for myself that I was willing to put in the work that it takes to self-publish a book and, you know, hire the editors, hire the cover designer, the formatting, and then uploading it to all the different types of formats, whether it's Apple Books, Google Books, all that jazz, and being willing to teach myself. By the end of that year, doing all of that was way easier than querying. I was like, I am so done asking people to consider my book.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, to have that relief of just being like, I do not need any agent's approval on my book. I can just approve it myself and then do the work. So I'm really glad that you had that mind shift and you're able to see that experience as, I can do this myself and I don't need to have this emotional weight on me. And there was so much you learned on how, like, how am I going to get my book to sell and, you know, get it into readers' hands and such. So that's amazing that you're able to flip that experience from a really down one to a positive one.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's talk a bit about Cupid's Compass then. So give us just a brief pitch on what it's about.
Yeah, so my book is based in a world where people have compass tattoos on their wrist that point to their soulmate. And this whole idea, the reason I have all these different characters is it's like, what would people do if they were told by, you know, an external source who their significant other should be? Would relationships be more likely to be successful? Would people be eager to go and meet their person as soon as they get their compass? Because in my book, like they don't get it until they reach a certain age of maturity, which is usually somewhere in like the teenage years. And you know, who would rebel? Who would be like, you can't tell me who I'm meant to love in this lifetime? So it's just like an exploration of like all types of love and what people would do and really like what are soulmates.
Yeah, I loved your exploration of soulmates. And what I liked so much is that it wasn't just romance. There was like various different kinds of relationships that you explored. And I thought that was so interesting. So, what was your inspiration for going that route of like a soulmate determined based off of a compass tattoo that you get?
Well, I don't know that I have exclusively one source of information. Like, I have a long blog about this. I have three that I'll like synopsis for you really quickly. One, I would say, like my mom. My mom actually works in couples and relationship and like sex counseling. So I've had a lot of exposure in my life to this idea of like what makes a healthy relationship and what do consent and boundaries really look like. And that really inspired me to write a book that was more not like partially sex positive, but also just like not full further endorsing this idea of what we're seeing in young adult romance, which is like toxic,
Yeah.
toxic relationships, endorsing jealousy, endorsing like miscommunication. And I really wanted to kind of change that narrative because as a reader, I was tired. I was like, I want to see a healthy relationship. My second inspiration, I would say, absolutely was my like childhood love for mythology. I mean, I started with Percy Jackson, as so many people do, but I have always loved and like started with Greek mythology from there, you know, Roman, Norse, Chinese, all that jazz. So when I was naming this book and I realized like I was like, oh, Cupid's the god of love, Cupid's compass, and like the opportunity to start integrating what I ended up choosing as Roman mythology into this like world was like another just like one of those like three key factors that sparked the inspiration for the essence of this book. And then the third one is a little more vague that not everyone will understand, but when I was younger on Tumblr, there used to be these like social media posts that would be like, what if the entire world was black and white, and then the day you met your soulmate, you could see color for the first time, and that's how you knew you met your person? Or oh, there was so many, like it was just this trend where people would, you know, basically do these like mini story pitches, and then people would like comment underneath and be like, but then when your soulmate dies the world goes back to black and white. And I used to love reading these, and I wish I could think of another example of one. That's a really good example of one. But I think that's like on a subconscious level, those started to like, you know, inspire me from a long time ago because I really was like, oh man, like what if there was this? Oh, another one I've seen is like you have a matching tattoo with your soulmate, and the minute you find the person with a matching tattoo to yours, then you know that that's your person. But so yeah, that's my kind of third, more obscure inspiration. I think, you know, a decade, 2 decades from now, nobody's going to know what Tumblr is anymore. It's definitely not a trending social media platform anymore, but it was definitely part of my inspiration for this book.
Oh, the memories of middle school are coming back of when we all had Tumblrs.
Oh,
I love that era. So I love those inspirations, and I love that you wanted to go that route of showing healthy relationships in YA because yeah, it's true. It's kind of gotten out of hand, and I'm tired of it as well.
and not to say that everything in the series is going to be fluffy and wholesome and perfect, because I do have characters intentionally showing the contrast. Like, and not only, like you said, in romantic relationships, but I have parent child relationships, I have friendships, and like just really showing, like, look at this example of this mother daughter who are not in alignment with each other and are actively like allowing their relationship to become toxic versus this other mother and daughter who are really showing up for each other and forcing themselves to communicate through hard things. And so, with the intention of having the healthy relationships, I still do have some, you know, debatably more darker themes of love and relationships in this book, but it's meant to further highlight those contrasts.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that you show that it's not all just, fluffy and happy all the time, but just being real. And I
Mhm.
think that that's something that I loved so much about it is that I felt like the characters with the challenges they go through, that they are going to be very relatable to a large amount of readers with various situations that they go through. And then with the mythology, I was really curious. You explained just a little bit about how you chose Roman mythology with, Cupid and compass and going that route. Was there a lot of research you had to put into with Roman mythology?
Yeah, and I skipped over a tiny piece. That's that. specific story, which I think a lot of readers would be entertained to know. And that's that, like, when I originally wrote the first draft of this book, I had actually had it written, like, the title was still Cupid's Compass, but I was using like a blend of like Greco-Roman. So, like, I was just like jumping between Greek and Roman mythology as I pleased because I loved both. And then one of my really early beta readers was like, stop it, pick one. And I was like, I have to pick one. And so the Greek name for Cupid is Eros. And I was like, could I make change the compass or the book title to something along like Eros, Arrows? And I was just like, oh, I'm not vibing.
Yeah.
And I really don't see books committing to Roman mythology because ultimately Roman mythology is a lot of copycat just from Greek, just with their own little twists and flavors. So I was like, you know what? It'll be fresh. It'll be unique. So I committed to Roman at that time. And though I did have pretty good understanding, I was very well read in the mythology, I still had my fair share of research that came up. Like, I was halfway through the book at one point, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. Do the Roman gods also go to Mount Olympus? Is there another name for Mount Olympus? And like they just don't. They go to the Pantheon, which is like a really famous building in Rome. And like there's a couple things that you just like stop all of a sudden and you'd be like, oh, do they have this? Like, because they're so blended in my brain, but like I understand they're distinctly different. So of all the research I had to do for this book, that was the most fun. That was the
Hmm.
research I was most excited to do.
Right. Like when you just love mythology in general, I can imagine that would be a really fun part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like the name Cupid is also a lot more recognizable too. I feel like of any Roman name, it's Cupid that I know, but then everything else is Greek. So, yeah, that's
Absolutely.
a great choice. And then, so in your story, you have the 11 POVs. So that's quite a few. I'm wondering what made you decide to choose 11 characters to focus on, and what was it like juggling those different POVs?
So ironically, I actually thought it was 10 until ARC reviews started coming in after my book was published, and everyone was like, there's 11 point of views, there's 11 point of views. And I was like, what do you mean there's 11? And I like went through and counted, I was like, there's 11. That was a funny, like not intentional outcome, but honestly, like it was really fun. When I was very first, that first day, when I had all of those pieces of paper out, spread out on the floor, I knew right away I wanted to have multiple characters. And so, like, I just divided them up. I was like, first, I went by archetype. I'm like, okay, well, I want a jester kind of character, and I want a mentor kind of character, and I want a rebel kind of character. And then after I had that outline, I was like, okay, let's input some zodiacs to give them really different personalities. So I was like, you are a Cancer, and you are an Aries, and you are a Libra. And then I intentionally went through and made sure aesthetically every single one of them was different. And the longer I wrote the book, the more I really got clear on like, okay, this is this character's voice notes and how they differ. This is this character's religious beliefs and how they differ. And I was really, really intentional on trying to make sure that all the characters were so distinctly different, not only so that I would reach a really vast audience that almost anybody could find someone that they were really like either relating to or like could really be excited for. But also just so that you wouldn't confuse the characters. It was especially tricky with, for example, Nessie and Lacey because they're the same age, they're best friends, they live in the same city. So really trying to separate those two and like basing that off of feedback from my beta readers, like these two characters' voices are blending. And I'm like, okay, these two need to think more differently. So I was like, okay, I need to step Nessie up into being more of like an intellectual, an overthinker, really articulate. And in the same breath, I'm now going to make Lacey more emotional, maybe not thinking about her actions so much, but living by her, like the heart on her sleeve, and just really making sure those character choices were different so that they were easier to follow and go through. So what I often find is when I'm receiving feedback about my book is sometimes people are like, oh, I don't remember this character's name, but they were the one that, and they like perfectly can describe the character. So some people get lost a little bit with the number, but nobody, especially after you get past those initial introductions, I find most people don't have a hard time splitting them up. And at the end, everyone's like, I wouldn't have wanted you to cut a single character. Like every single one of those characters was relevant and important.
Right. Yeah, you just mentioning that just made me think, yeah, that's like how I was able to keep up with all of the characters is that they all did feel very distinct and
Mhm.
I didn't confuse anybody with I thought you did a really great job of making them each their own character and not making them two alike.
Yeah, and like I made sure to put, what's that called? Like the index at the back of the book with all the characters for people who needed it. And ultimately there's gonna be readers who are like, oh, this book would have been better if it just followed one character following their compass. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the story I wanted to tell. The story I wanted to tell was this broader perspective of soulmates, not just one classic story. So that's something I'm always really articulate when I'm pitching my book to people is like, I need you to understand this is following multiple characters who all end up interconnecting in unexpected ways. And if your brain doesn't like that, this might not be for you. But because I wrote a book I wanted to read, that was what I wanted to read. And I know there's going to be readers out there who are going to really, really love that too.
Yeah, I love that direction that you went in. And yeah, with the idea of like soulmates, it's like I don't want to read just one perspective of it. It's just somebody who's just, oh, I'm just so excited to meet my soulmate. Like, what if there's someone who
Right.
doesn't want to? What if they're not excited about this? So yeah, I'm glad that you explored those different perspectives. And with every character, they all go through their own unique situation. Like, for example, you have a couple who are on the brink of divorce. And then you also have another character who is, lost a loved one, or another character who's just so excited to meet their soulmate, but they're a teenager. So you delve into a whole lot of these situations, and a lot of them are kind of like emotional, tricky. You even put like a trigger warning in the very beginning, just saying like, I did my best to handle these situations as best I could. And then you had a lot of feedback from readers as well, I'm sure, on a lot of these. What was it like writing those situations, and what made you want to delve into, those deeper complex topics?
I think like as a person, like I've always been, really emotional and like I really value human experience and like relatability. And I think that there's a lot of really big themes in life from, grief and like exploring your own identity and all those things that really need or can be looked at in these like I don't know, like fictional worlds. So like, well, the top of this story, like the what would you call it? Like the story that comes out seems to be this more like magical kind of like fantasy romance. Like to have those deeper pieces is really what's going to like emotionally move people. And for me, like I like books that make me feel things. And I wanted to write a book that made people feel things. Like there's nothing that brings my heart more joy than knowing that my book made you cry or that you physically threw it across the room in outrage. Like that is fantastic because that was what I was trying to create. Because, like I said, like I was trying to write the book I want to read. And that's the kind of book I want to read.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and I just felt like they were just so deep and just relatable. I feel like with all these different situations, I feel like everyone who would pick up your book could be like, "Yeah, I'm like that person," or like, uh, like I felt like if I was a teenager who got the tattoo, I would be like, "Oh yeah, I would be like on my adventure searching for my soulmate right now,"
Yeah,
you know? And then but then
absolutely.
like reading as an adult, I'm like, okay, I can totally see through this other lens. And yeah, it's very emotional and deep and complex, and I think readers will definitely like reading that with all these characters and their various life situations. So looking back on everything that you've been through with writing and, querying, what is one piece of advice you give your past self? Or if you want to go in the direction of giving advice to aspiring authors, you can do that too.
Um, I like, oh, there's so many things. I mean, part of me is like, Writing is a dedication, and if you wait to be motivated, you're never going to finish. So having like a really scheduled routine and like choosing to make time even when you don't feel like writing is really going to be what moves you forward and takes the next step and like lets that dream come to fruition. So yeah, like I would say push through those lapses of whether it's fatigue or an uninspired mood or whatever it is that's holding you back, like dedicate yourself and don't wait to feel inspired because the muses are not reliable. They are going to disappear on you in the hardest moments. But until you write it out once, you can't fix it. You can't keep going. So I suppose that'll be, even though I probably could list like 10 different things, that's going to be mine for the interview.
I love that. And I feel like you're like speaking right to me because I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling like writing. I just won't write today. But so you just spoke right to me. I'm like, okay, Ashley, I'll take your advice. I'll do writing today. But yeah, that's true. Like setting your routine, even if you're not in the mood, it gets the book done. And then you'll feel really proud of it in the end.
Yeah, and like so for me, I like weekdays from 8 to 10, I have it blocked off. Like that is my writing time. And I'm not gonna lie, there are days where I come and I just lay on the floor in my office and I'm like, my only job today is to brainstorm where this one character arc is going or what needs to happen in this chapter. Like I cannot be on TikTok, I cannot be going for coffee with friends. I am going to be in this room for 2 hours. And if you want to spend the whole 2 hours on the floor, that's fine. But like committing that time because a lot of writing really is internal. It's a lot of figuring things out in your head, but setting that intentional time is what's going to help you get through those hurdles.
I love that. So good. All right, let's get into some rapid fire questions. All
Yeah.
right, so what is your favorite trope?
Love triangles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know that not a lot of people love them, but I am such a sucker for a well-written love triangle. Oh, like I love not only consuming them, but also like writing them. And yeah, no, that's my go-to.
They're definitely very entertaining. I do enjoy a good love triangle. So, what's a book recommendation you got that has a well done love triangle that people could
Oh,
pick up?
I would say one of my favorite love triangles is probably the Clockwork Angel series by Cassandra Clare.
Ah,
That one,
oh yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, is she going to mention Clockwork Angel? So
yeah,
good. So good.
yeah,
And then what is your favorite writing drink slash snack?
coffee, just coffee.
Yep.
Probably not the greatest for me, but it is what it is.
I'm sure a lot of people are will choose the same thing. They're like, "Yep, just go for coffee." What is your favorite book currently?
Spicy question. Um, I'm gonna say the Song of Achilles, but I literally have so many.
Song of Achilles. I heard really good things about that book. Which mythology is it based on? It's Greek.
Great.
Okay. Cool. Good to know.
No, I Madeline Miller is currently my favorite author. Like her prose, her knowledge of mythology, her accuracy and her story weaving, and just like, oh, like her emotional output and like capturing, I can't pitch her enough. I know this is supposed to be rapid fire, but if you haven't read The Song of Achilles, you should read it.
All right. I am putting it on my TBR and high on my TBR now. What are you working on right now?
Book two. I am working on book two of Cupid's Compass.
Yay, how is that going?
So good. I am what I would describe to be as like in like the final leg of draft one. So the very first version of the book, which Cupid's Compass went through 4 or 5 drafts. So, but I do find the ones after this one go faster. But I'm very close to writing kind of like that, like climax ending scene. So yeah, it's going great.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. And yeah, with that ending of Cupid's Compass, I'm like, I need book two right now. So
Yeah,
no
you
rush
and the
though.
whole world and me.
And where can readers find you?
So I often direct people to my Instagram at Ashley Weiss Writes with periods between each word. That is like my like daily blogging, like always sharing my author life and just what I'm reading. However, like I am on Facebook where I just leave some like major like these are event announcements or like book announcements. But I often really encourage people to sign up for my newsletter. You can find that in both my Instagram bio and on my website because that's where I end up sharing, every quarter or so, like the really big, exciting news. Like, this is the title reveal, this is the cover reveal, this is, the sale that's going to be happening. So, yeah, Instagram's my primary, but if you don't want those daily updates, my newsletters are like the big, exciting news announcements.
All right, good to know. And I will link everything in the show notes for you guys to check out. And if you are on YouTube, it'll be in the description below. So thank you so much, Ashley. I had such a fun time chatting with you about just everything, writing your book, all that.
Thank you so much, Julie, for having me. You are such a fantastic interviewer. I
Oh, thank you.
prepared you for this and all your questions. They were fantastic. I really appreciate you not only reading my book, but making time to do this interview.
Of course, of course. I really enjoyed it. All right. Well, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.